So let's go back to the conference realignment thought. Gonzaga has been talked about with the Pac-12 in some terms. The Mountain West they flirted with years ago, probably to better boost their standing with the WCC to get what they wanted in terms of negotiation. And then you talked about the Big 12 as of this summer. There was some talks, but I think the WCC is right for Gonzaga. They headline them. Gonzaga's proven you can play for a national title out of that league. But I don't know if college athletics is going to look the same in 5 years based on everything happening. What are some of your thoughts on conference realignment?
Well, I mean, there's so many, Dan. I mean, the first and foremost, when you look at Gonzaga, if you just look at, for their sake, conference realignment's been going on for a while now, decade.
Yeah.
Right.
Not to the extent over the last,
I mean, the Big
2
East.
years.
No, it's certainly hit a different velocity these days, but there's not been any alignment because of men's basketball. Nobody has signed a program or brought a program in because of their men's basketball.
The only one that without interrupting you too much, the only one I can think of would be UConn going back to the Big East.
But they have football.
They do have football.
They
but
do
it's
have
like
so that's what I mean, though. But there's a football program attached to it. Syracuse had a football program attached to it. Pitt had a football program attached to it, right? So Gonzaga doesn't have a football program. So if they are to realign to a conference, they would make history. They would be the first school to go grab space in another conference just because of their brand in men's basketball. So we haven't seen that happen yet anywhere. I know the Big 12 was chasing UConn as well, but they had football, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gonzaga would have been the only basketball program. So until that happens, I don't know. I don't know if it happens, right? And if maybe we get to a point when the dust settles and everybody kind of finds their space in these new conferences, then maybe they start to go after basketball programs. We don't. Who knows what will happen down the road? But I don't know if, the thing about the Big 12 I kept going to in my mind is, okay, so there's a pie of money and they've split it up. And now they have to go to each school to get permission to allow Gonzaga in. Well, do you think Bill Self is going to give up some of the money that he would get at Kansas and then he'd bring his team up to play at the McCarthy Athletic Center? He'd be okay with that? To bring the brand into the conference? I don't know.
Well, that's a difficult one. I think if Gonzaga were to go to I don't want to call it a higher profile conference, but it truly is, even though the WCC has provided what GU needs to get to this point.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that would have to happen. You're right in the fact that Bill Self bringing Kansas up to Spokane every year, or when these bigger conferences, sometimes it's every other year. You're now looking at the smallest arena in those conferences.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of things.
So you'd have to increase capacity of the McCarthy Athletic Center.
And then you have to look at maybe Veterans Memorial Arena, right, which is bigger, but then you're sharing gate, you're sharing parking, you're sharing concessions, right? So the financial trickle down of all of that, when Gonzaga now gets all the proceeds to every home game, how does all that work? There's smart people that would figure that out. I don't think any of that stuff would be deal breakers, but I'm just saying that there's hurdles to that. I think the Pac-12 would have been the perfect place for Gonzaga, both style, logistics, right? Because again, if you're going to fly the men's basketball program around, you still have to
regional on the West Coast.
You have to fly the golf team around. You have to fly the soccer teams around. So, and again, Gonzaga doesn't have football, right? They don't have this.
But years ago,
this base, yeah.
I remember it was like Pac-12 North, Pac-12 South for baseball and other sports. And if I remember correctly, like University of Portland and Gonzaga baseball were in what was called the Pac-10 North or whatever it was called.
Yeah. Well, before the Pac-12 blew up, I mean, I was thinking, well, this is because Gonzaga's brand is big enough. It's got real value, and the Pac-12 may have needed that. And you throw that in there with U of A and Oregon and UW, I mean, it's pretty good basketball. So I don't know, who knows? If anybody who tells you that they know what's going to happen now, they're in la la land.
Well, I was talking.
We don't know. We don't know. They could stay in the WCC, if the Pac-12 and Mountain West AAC, that if they merge and become something, who knows? They could end up there. In time, they could end up in the Big 12 or the Big East. I mean, all of these things are rumored. The fact of the matter is that nobody's showed up with the bag.
Yeah, and that's what people want to see.
Yeah.
Is that money at the end?
That's when you know that
there
it'll
are
be
coaches
serious.
that don't even know anything of what's possibly happening until it happens.
Yeah.
I mean, I've talked to multiple college coaches that they've just said, I have no clue where we're going to be 2 years from now.
And the advantage for Gonzaga is that they have been recruiting nationally now for 15 years, right? And their non-conference schedule has already been developed and proven over time. So when they go sit down with a 4-star or even a 5-star recruit, they can still sell that. Conference, they've never sold the West Coast Conference to those recruits. They're selling everything else. So I think Gonzaga can still get to where they need to go in all of that, regardless of what conference they are in. Because if they go to the Big 12, does that mean there's more NIL money for Gonzaga that's going to show up? I don't know. Maybe the recruiting gets a little easier, but I don't know if somebody is more likely to start contributing to NIL because they're in a bigger conference. I may be completely wrong about that, but I don't know.
Well, it might even negatively impact them because if you've got
It's harder to
power
win a
conference schools that have a huge NIL collective behind them, you're going to get outbid more times than not, I would think. So there's lots of negatives and positives to it that they have to sift through.